Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard. Thank you for watching today's Northeast Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We wake up on Friday morning, we look at the hazards map from the National Weather Service, and you guys are the winner in the Northeast with the winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories. We've got flood issues to talk about in the central U.S., but when it comes to active current weather, the Northeast is ruling the central or the lower 48 right now. We can look at the satellite picture early on this Friday morning. And there it is, the nor'easter that's impacting the Northeast right now, bringing some heavy snow to parts of the Northeast. How much snow is expected with the rest of this storm system? Well, it's anywhere from 6 to maybe 10 inches across parts of New York State, getting into New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Locally higher totals possible there in some of the high elevation areas, where we certainly could go in excess of 1 foot of snow there, again, in some of the higher elevation areas. Total precipitation from this, highest totals as we wrap up this thing over the next 24 hours, about an inch of liquid equivalent there across parts of Maine. And again, the same areas that are seeing those heavy snows going across parts of New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York State. We can take a look here. The good news is this moves out off to the Northeast. As we go into the middle of next week, we enter a bit of a quiet period in parts of the Northeast. It's not until we get to next weekend we really see the next chance for significant precipitation to move into the area. And we can go ahead and step through time a little bit slower here. We get through Saturday midnight. This thing's beginning to lift out of the region, so it should be by the time we get into Sunday, certainly entering a quieter period across the Northeast region here. As we get into early next week, we're watching a storm system track through parts of the Corn Belt over the weekend, perhaps bringing some light precipitation to parts of the southern areas of the Northeast region here, parts of Pennsylvania, southern New York State, getting into Massachusetts, down across parts of New Jersey. Again, maybe some light precipitation. This would be on Monday. But then certainly as we get into midweek and late next week, entering not only a quiet period across the Northeast, but we'll start to warm back up. We're in an active period here, seeing storm systems every 3, 4, 5 days, and in between those, in advance of each one, we warm up, and behind each one, we cool down a little bit with stormy weather in between. We can take a look at that here, looking at the European models, 500 millibar height forecast. Right now we're watching, again, we're seeing this main storm system swing out of the area. We'll watch a ridge start to move in. Let's go ahead and just play this out. We see cooler weather. I'm going to go click through here time by time. So we're watching this big nor'easter get out of here. This is on Saturday now. This is beginning to move out. We go into the early part of next week, getting into Monday, and again we see a big trough here, it's a little bit east of the Hudson Bay there, but that's going to pump some cooler air in here, again helping to bring the cooler temperatures in behind our weekend nor'easter. But then I want to play this out as we get into mid to late next week. We see a broad ridge overspreading the central U.S., and that begins to spread into the Northeast late next week, Thursday and Friday. That is when we begin watching our next storm system, though, over the western U.S. That's going to impact the Midwest, probably late next week into next weekend, and then perhaps pushing into the Northeast in some form or another late next weekend. So a bit of a dry period here, a little reprieve after the nor'easter right now, but we'll have to turn our attention towards what could be some more precipitation getting into the end of next week. Temperature anomalies, I'm going to go ahead and just step through this slowly because it's an active map. I'm getting asked here in central Illinois, when is spring going to arrive? And it's a similar story in the Northeast. We're in it. It's just an active period, so we're not seeing prolonged periods of, substantial warmth. We're not seeing, a week straight of really warm weather, but we're not seeing prolonged extremely cold temperatures either. We're kind of just in a volatile period here, and we can go ahead, we'll watch this. Right now on the weekend, we're seeing cooler weather begin to funnel into the area, and behind that nor'easter that we're seeing right now, we get into early next week, seeing certainly colder than average temperatures across the area, anywhere from 5 to 10 degrees below average. But then we play this out into next week, and as we get into, this is Friday, getting into Saturday, this is when we finally see that ridge of high pressure beginning to overspread the eastern U.S., we start to tap back into that warmer weather. So, seeing certainly hazardous winter weather right now over the weekend. We'll see a bit of cooler air sinking in early to mid next week, but then as we get into the late part of next week, that's when we start seeing some of those warmer temperatures moving into the Northeast. But there you already see the cooler weather following and behind next weekend storm system. That'll begin pushing into the Northeast region as we end next weekend. So we can watch the total precipitation forecast here, or 24-hour total precipitation forecast from the European Ensemble forecast. And the reason I want to show you that is, certainly to watch this thing get out of here, but then focus in on the Northeast region. It's mostly dry for most of next week. It's just this little system creeping through here, which would be on Monday across the Northeast region, bringing possibly some light precipitation to, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and south of there on Monday. But otherwise, quiet across the Northeast for most of the work week coming up, and just a bit of a roller coaster ride when we talk about temperatures. We'll talk about those here to end this. We'll look at a high temperature forecast here for Friday, looking at anywhere from the 30s and the 40s across the Northeast region, getting into the 50s across the southern portions here. That cooler air begins to work in as we get into early next week, so we're going to jump ahead here to Monday. That's where we see cooler temperatures sinking in. We've got 20s and 30s across New York through Maine, 30s and 40s across southern portions, but then again we start to warm up Wednesday. Thursday, we've already got 60s back in across parts of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and then 50s overspreading the area that's seeing winter weather right now into New York State, across parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, getting into the mid-40s across Maine. So there you have it. It's an active period. We'll watch each one as we go through time here. Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks on Monday morning in our Ag Forecast video. I'll have your next regional forecast for you right here on Tuesday. That's where we can kind of dive in more specifically on what we're looking at for late next weekend. As always, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.